Well, I did some cleaning yesterday, believe it or not. And I cleaned our upstairs room we have above our garage, and it's kind of our, what would you call it? Junk room. But let's say it's a craft room / exercise room, okay? And so I went through and cleaned some stuff. Mark did the floors and took care of a bunch of stuff, and then I had this long counter. And I found a box of items that had been shipped over from my grandfather. Well, let's see. One of my uncles, actually, when one of my uncles passed, but it was mainly things from my Oma and Opa in the Netherlands. And so I found in there were various things. I found a really awesome coffee mug of Queen Beatrix from Holland, which was very cool. I'd forgotten that what I had that was I inherited. But I also found this little book, and it says Birthday Scripture Textbook. And I thought, well, what? So I looked in here, and there's this beautiful inscription in Dutch. So I thought, boy, isn't it interesting how at times have changed? Again, I sound like I'm 100 years old. Here I am. Here I go. But in the old days, right, I would have written this out. Anybody remember in the old days when you were writing to somebody overseas, there was a certain blue sheet. Anybody remember that? That was like a piece of paper, but it was long this way, and it was blue, and then you could write your message, and then you folded it up, and then you'd have to go get it franked or whatever at the post office, and then they could send it overseas. So then I would have to do that, right? If I wanted to figure out what this was, I would just handwrite it in a letter to one of my cousins over there, and then eventually I would get it back, right? Or now I could email them, right? And then, yes, I do know about Google Translate. So I did use that last night, although Ben had to show me how to do it. So I don't know for sure what it says. As a something, and it's very hard to read this writing, of true esteem and love, loving you very much. And it was by Mr. E. Lenhia. Lehneer. I don't know if any of my cousins in the Netherlands are watching, I guess, the recording, but I should ask them, who is that? Do you know? But anyway, so it was just really fun to look through, and there's all these, this was printed in London. Oh, I didn't tell you the date. March 15th, 1876 is when this book was given to somebody, and I'm not sure who. So I called my sister, so we kind of had some discussion last night, trying to kind of guess and figure it out. But there are little things in the margin in this Bible written in Dutch. So again, I have this beautiful script, but it just makes it a little hard, especially if you don't know the words, to try to guess what the words are. But anyway, so that'll be my project. But I thought, I don't know this person. I don't even know whose Bible this belonged to. I'm assuming probably my great-grandmother, I'm guessing. But I don't even know, but it didn't matter, right? It doesn't matter because, again, I thought, boy, here's this gentleman who loved this person very much, I don't know who, and gave them this Bible and took the time to write in these different, in the margins, it's beautiful, these different thoughts that were shared. And I thought, there is so much history, right, that we can learn from. And so I'm hoping that, if nothing else, throughout this year, that some of these different moments will kind of come over you when you go, wow, okay, life is bigger than me, right? This church is bigger than just me. Christianity, right, is bigger than just our denomination. And again, I know we all know that, but sometimes we just need kind of reminders of that, of how things continue. So in the back, Bill found and knew exactly where they were and pulled them out for me, some beautiful old books from the American Baptist Church. And Bill's going to come up here in just a few minutes to share some memories and some thoughts. But again, you might know, looking there, oh, that could be my great-great-great-grandmother, right? Or you might not know, or maybe you'll go, oh, I recognize that name. I wonder if it's a relative of someone here. Or you're going to go, I'm sure there's nobody here that I even know or am related to, but isn't this amazing? Look at these signatures. Look at this writing. Look at what all these people did. And that's what I'm hoping that we are going to be able to do this year in our Heritage Year. Here's some pictures to kind of show you. Again, maybe you've seen some of these, but to just kind of get things rolling a little bit. And again, hopefully downstairs we'll have a lot of these different pictures. We already have some of them down there, and we're going to rotate them throughout the year. But here's another one, again, a little bit more recent, that some of us, even I, and I've been here 16 years, recognize some people there, and maybe many of you obviously know them, and they're probably related, daughters, etc. And then there's one more here. Again, this was for the centennial? Bicentennial. Centennial, okay. So anyway, so here's some pictures of, again, just some of the different people that have lived and gone and sat in these same exact pews. Maybe they didn't have the red thing, I don't think, right? That's relatively new, relatively being relative. But so there are some different pictures, again, to just kind of look at and go, yeah, either I remember those people or I have no idea who they are, but yet they were faithful that they were here, and they were imperfect, like we are imperfect, but yet they served. So here's what we're doing this year. If you can see here, there's a listing of some of the different dates that we are remembering. So the reason we started things today is because on Wednesday is when the American Baptist Church in Haskins was formed. And I just want to read this, that I'm sure many of you have heard this before, because I've used it before, and I know probably others have too, but this was actually also in a book from 1926, and then Georgia Twining, and I don't know the date, but kind of added to this to make it more recent. I don't know when that was exactly, but maybe Bill will tell us. But this one's from the 1926 church history. But it says, on the 8th day of February, 1862, 5 devout Christians facing the winter's chill and traveling over mud roads gathered in the old schoolhouse at 5 Points to organize a Baptist church as a branch of the Perrysburg Church. The 5 Points schoolhouse was located 1/2 mile north of Haskins. And so it just talks about the different founders that were there. There were 5, it says the names of those 5 staunch Christians, and I love that. Our church founders has become a hallowed memory. And then it lists them: George Thornton, Henry DeVerna, George Rosetta Thornton, and Sarah King. Again, faith of our fathers and mothers, right? And then talking again about how they went ahead to form this church, American Baptist Church in Haskins. Isn't it cool, again, to be able to look at these different things and go, at the time, can you imagine what that would have been like at the time? And can you imagine that I'm guessing, the flack that they got, right? What do you mean they're starting another church? What's wrong? Just drive a little further and go to the regular church down the road. Why would you have to start your own one? What's that about, right? And we have the same type of things, right? Is that we have changes, we have things that we feel God calling us to do, situations, times of change, right? And so we step out sometimes as well in faith. October 17th, 1872, the E&R Church was dedicated here in Haskins. Again, which was one of the first predecessors of the UCC, right? Congregational and E&R together became, and lots of other streams, eventually became the UCC. I am not going to preach on this every single Sunday. Some of you maybe are glad of that. Some of you maybe are disappointed. I really geek out on history, and I'm getting a lot more out of this sermon than I have other ones, So we are going to try to just spread things out. So the general basic formula, if you will, is going to be, we're going to be focusing on American Baptist things in the winter. Again, not every single sermon, not every single Sunday, but just certain things that we'll be having some pictures, some books, talking about different things. We're going to focus on the United Church of Christ in the spring. We're going to focus on the Federation. So the Federation, May 5th, 1946. Haskins Federated Church was formed. And then within my time, we changed it to Haskins Community Church. But 1946 is when the UCC Church closed and they merged together. And then in between there, we're going to absolutely talk about the Presbyterian Church in town, that and their history, and how many of those members, and again, some of them, their descendants are faithful members today here, and how that all came together. But again, and so the Federation we're going to focus on in the summer, And then the fall, before we kind of finish things in October, will be more of our future. Okay, here's where we've gotten some of these different ideals from. Where are we going? And so that's kind of going to be the layout of the year. And during the year, we'll be having some extra speakers in from ABC Ohio, also from the UCC, and just lots of other celebrations. So we don't want to tell you too much because we want to surprise you on some of it, but yet we also want you to know it's going to be, I hope, a really phenomenal year for us. But again, imagine, and again, it's kind of odd years, 161, because all these things fell during COVID. So that's kind of why the numbers are kind of a little awkward, I guess. But 77 years ago, hey, let's federate. Hey, let's bring in this American Baptist Church, and let's bring in this Reformed Church, and two pretty different backgrounds and streams of denominations, and let's put this together and make it work. And we have. But again, the amount of vision that took to make such a change. And so again, I'm really hoping that as we are going through all this, looking at the different changes over the years, that we're inspired of what is God calling us to do in our day and in our time. So I'd like to invite Bill Garrett to come forward. He's going to share, and while he's coming up, I did want to mention that we do have several, come on up, Bill. There are several American Baptist flyers back there that if you're like, you know what, I haven't looked at that in a while, or maybe I'm UCC and I really don't know much about American Baptist Church. You can pick those up or look online and get some information that way. So here is Bill Garrett.
Thank you, Pastor, for that introduction. But I have a confession to make. It was 1936 when I first came to this church, and I didn't walk, because that was the year I was born, but I know my mother brought me here. So many of my relatives were members of this church. I've counted them several times, and there was 14 or 15, and some of those had passed away before I was born. So there's a long history of our family in this church. But today I just want to talk briefly about some of the buildings that took place involving the Baptists in this community. I mean, Jenny mentioned that in 1862, that's when the first group was formed to bring about this church. But it was April of 1875 before they decided to put a building in this location. That was 13 years after they started. I happen to have a relative that was involved in that first committee. His name was Elwood Garrett. And there was also Resin Jewell, Amos Twining, G. Thornton, and William Atkins. And they were authorized to build a building 30 by 50 feet with a small basement. But I understand, according to the records, the basement at that time was never built. We do not know who built the church. There's no record of who did the construction. There was probably local carpenters, I imagine, in the community and of the church that built it. But the cost of that church was $1,761. They put a limit of $1,800 when they voted to do this. And so $1,761 was within that budget limit. However, there was some problems after the church was built. And I think, Haley, you might be able to show those two pictures. Yeah, that was the first church that was built in 1875. Or actually it was 1876 when it was completed. But it took them 10 years to pay off the debt for that church of $1,761. And apparently there was some people who had said they would contribute to the construction of the church, but apparently it didn't happen as it should have. So there was a group of ladies. They were called the Ladies' Mite Society that raised the money to finish paying off that debt. And the lender of that money happened to be out of New York. Now, it doesn't say exactly whether that was a bank or whether it was a Baptist Mission Society or what it was. We don't know. But on July the 10th, 1886, the trustees sent $200 and paid off the debt that was owed on that building. So it took them 10 years to pay off that construction of that building. So as time went on, things were added or improved on that building. In 1887, property was bought for a parsonage across the street. Was bought from Mr. George Yount. Now I'm assuming that's the same parsonage or building that's there today, but that was 1887. So it's been there a long time. During those early years, whenever they had a meeting, they called them covenant meetings. And these were great spiritual power in the old system of governing, and that's why they called them a covenant meeting. But there was obligation to these people that went to these meetings. First of all, they had to be members, they had to be paying members, and they had to attend church. If they didn't, they were dropped from the rolls. And that happened frequently, if you read the old records. So as time went on, things were changed and constructed. In 1900, there was a woodshed built behind the church. Now, why would you want a woodshed? Well, it was for wood, because the buildings were heated with wood stoves. And many of the members of the church would go out and cut down trees and cut the wood and split it to heat the church. And in 1908, new gas lights were put into that church. That's before electricity. So what the trustees had to do, however, was to check with their insurance company to make sure that their insurance was covered with gas lights. In 1910, the churchyard was improved and there was new hitching post placed at the church for the buggies and horses. That was 1910. It would be 1911 when a committee was formed to consider remodeling the present building. The committee was Joseph Garrett, O.B. Brown, Henry Twining, William Armitage, and Henry Wenig. And they received a plan from T.R. Wickenden. He was a man that gave them the plans and designed the building. It was moved that they would proceed with those plans. O.B. Brown was granted the contract for excavating and for putting in the basement and the concrete floor. And he happened to be, I think, a member of the church. The contract for building the church was Charles A. Watts. And it just so happens that a relative of Charles is here today. Jerry Heckler. And he was also the grandfather of Mary Ellen Futrell. So he has a direct connection to this church family. But he built this building, what you see right here today. it's amazing what you see. And that's when the glass and stained glass windows were installed. And this window to the west was financed by the Willing Workers class. There was several classes active in the church at that time. And they raised the money to pay for that window. So how many windows are in this church? Well, I counted 14. And right now there's one you can't see. You know where that is? It's behind the elevator. And there was a couple of other windows. If you look at an old photo of the front of the church, there was 2 round windows in the belfry, and one above this, the large window there to the north. And of course, those were gone when they put the new siding on the church. They took those out. What happened to them, we don't know. But, you know, this structure that you see right now is amazing, if you think about it. I mean, Matt and I and Jeff have been up in the attic, and we know what's up there. The beams that are up there that support these beams, that support this ceiling. So it's amazing. Whoever designed it, maybe it was Charles Watts, I don't know. Sure he had something to do with it. But the question is, how much of that old church that she showed before was used to construct this? Because that original building was 30 feet wide. Now, how wide is this church? Well, I think it's 60 feet from one window to the other. So they didn't use much of that original building. And it's reported that they took down the steeple from that original building. So it's an amazing structure. I mean, I know the people that come here every Sunday, you know, don't realize that. But look at the floor of this church. It's not flat, is it? Imagine what the floor structure is underneath this floor and how that was built, designed, and of course there was no computers back then. So it's an amazing structure, and I hope we continue to appreciate it and take care of it. Also, in those early days, in that first structure, this wall here was the end of the church. There was a door right here that went outside. You know, the addition was not put on until 1950. The Sunday school rooms, they also had to enlarge the basement to accommodate that. But yeah, this wall was the back wall of the church. In 1949, there was a baptism here in this church, and I happened to be in the class. Where was the baptistry? What do you think? It was underneath the floor right there. So there was 8 people in my class, and I'd like to mention those names. That was May of 1949. And all I remember is I sat in that front row, and I don't remember going into the baptistry. But I did. I know. The pastor was Reverend Miller, and he was not a young man. And how he handled us 8 people, I'm not sure. But they were Suzanne Fox, Eva Mae Brown, Arlene Bauer, Sandra Armitage, Phyllis Andrews, and Jeanette Hummel, and Kevin Enright, and myself. We were the only 2 boys in the class. I don't remember everything about that. I'm Sorry, but, you know, it was a long time ago. But I know we received a little red folder, a book of instructions on what this was all about and what it meant to be a member of this church. And you came here to express your desire to be, that Lord, Jesus was your Lord and Savior. That was the main thing. But of those people that were in that class, they all were members of the Haskins school, you know, classmates. One in particular was a classmate of Jerry's. And I wanted to mention that when I was in school there, I would have difficulties with problems and so on, and I would go to this one person for answers, and she always would give me an answer, and that was Jeanette. Jerry can confess to that. She was special because in her early days in high school, she was having problems with her parents. And she had to do a lot of work at home before she ever come to school. So she was special. And of course, later on, she was the wife of Leon Studer. And they raised a wonderful family. So someday I hope that somebody can create a biography for Jeanette Hummel. She was special. So that is about all I have to tell you today about this building, but do appreciate what you see here because it's special. And Leon and Jeanette were also active in the church. In fact, they created a church newsletter, was called The Messenger. That was in 1966. They were co-editors of that newspaper. Okay.
Well, thank you, Bill Garrett. Thank you, Bill. So there's some history and some memories, and thank you so much, Bill, for sharing all that with us. I'm trying to talk him into giving a tour one of these Sundays of the back, so that again he can kind of show where things used to be, and there's stairs over here. I remember, and so I remember, I mean I don't remember, but I remember being told, but Bill's so much better at that, or anybody else who remembers the changes that have happened here. I just thought it would be really fun to share those as well. So thank you so much, Bill, for your memories. And again, just, every once in a while we'll ask you, anybody who wants to, write something up, we'll put it in the newsletter. Again, just to share those things. So again, thank you so much, Bill. We're going to, next week, we'll talk a little bit more about the history of American Baptist churches. There is on the other side of your prayer sheet, your announcement sheet is this sheet. This just comes straight from the American Baptist Church. But 10 facts you should know about American Baptists. And so next Sunday, I'll share a little bit of information with you of the history of American Baptist churches. And then next Sunday, I'll also show you a video from ABC Ohio. That will be a really nice thing to kind of see again how we fit into the larger picture of some of these different denominations. So